introduce Reverend Kathy Herron. She is a 2006 graduate of Fellowships of the Spirit. She is an ordained minister and practicing medium. Kathy has facilitated healing circles, meditation practices, and taught workshops on various topics such as the laws of attraction and creating a fulfilling life. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland, majoring in political science. Her professional life includes a career in the human services field, where she provided programs for people with disabilities, assisting with independent living skills, counseling, employment, and reasonable accommodation issues. Kathy also served for several years as a wraparound facilitator in a foster care system, bringing together family members, community supports, and professionals to set goals and develop plans for families in crisis. Throughout her life, Kathy has enjoyed the outdoors through backpacking, kayaking, hiking, and more. Most recently, gardening. Many of Kathy's ancestors grew up on farms. Tonight, she brings their lessons forward as she shares teachings from Braiding Sweetgrass, the Native American culture, some of which reflect on her own experiences. Without further ado, Reverend Kathy Herron.
Oh, my goodness. Well, how about that? I just don't know what to say about all that. So I just want to tell you a little bit about this grass. It smells so good. It is an amazing kind of thing. So I want to thank you very much for having me here tonight. I'm not an expert in Native American culture, but I do resonate a great deal with all of their teachings of loving kindness and honor and respect and reciprocity for the earth. And some of my own experiences mirror these teachings. And I look forward to sharing a little bit about that with you tonight. So Jane mentioned that this book about Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. It is an amazing book. And I could never tell you entirely the essence just by this one talk about the grass. So I hope that I can share a little bit about Braiding Sweetgrass, and then hope that as you guys go on later on in life that you go and read some of this book, or even better, have someone read it to you. It's that good. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of this grass, the whole title of the book is Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. So here's what she wrote about sweetgrass. Hold out your hands and let me lay upon them a sheaf of freshly picked sweetgrass, loose and flowing like newly washed hair. Golden green and glossy above, the stems are banded with purple and white where they meet the ground. Hold the bundle up to your nose, find the fragrance of the name Hierocolo odorado, meaning the fragrant holy grass. In our language, it is called winsik, the sweet-smelling hair of Mother Earth. Breathe it in, and you start to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. So how about that? Isn't that beautiful? So sometimes we forget how beautiful nature is. And like I said a minute ago, I didn't know much about braiding sweetgrass until I read Robin's book, and it was a gift from a friend. There are many stories in the book. It's fabulous, but like I just said a minute ago, I want to give the essence of those teachings by focusing on the grass tonight. So I'm very familiar with sweetgrass as a fragrant incense used for smudging or making beautiful bowls. I learned that harvesting and braiding sweetgrass is a symbol of how the Native Americans live and see the world, or how they see nature as part of them. They believe that sweetgrass was the first plant to grow on Mother Earth. The story of Sky Woman is their origin story, and their belief that the earth is family to be cared for begins. So the story is like this. In the beginning, there was Sky World. There was a hole in Sky World, and Sky Woman fell through the hole after an uprooted tree opened a hole in the sky floor. As she fell toward the ocean below, birds rose up and caught her and gently placed her on the back of a giant turtle, giving her a place to live. The animals dove into the water to bring up mud. Many didn't survive, but Muskrat did and carried a handful of the earth to the surface. Sky Woman spread the mud across Turtle's back. Then she sang and danced in gratitude, causing the earth to grow and expand until it became the continent known as Turtle Island, or North America. However, before leaving Skyworld, Sky Woman gathered seeds from the Tree of Life. She planted them on Turtle's back, bringing forth the plants, trees, and medicines that continue to sustain the world. So that's how the Native Americans look at the world, as if that's how it's kind of a little bit different than many of our Christian beliefs, where Adam and Eve in the garden, And interestingly, Eve had to leave the garden, but Mother Earth had, got to grow the garden. So to honor Sky Woman, or Mother Earth, we must be respectful to her by being responsible for the gifts she has given us and reciprocate by sharing what she gave us by giving back to the land or protecting her, and by giving our personal gifts to our fellow humans. So harvesting and braiding sweetgrass is an act of care and respect, and each of the 3 strands of the braid has significant meaning. The first 7 strands represent ancestors, 7 generations behind them, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc. The second 7 strands represent sacred teachings, love, respect, honesty, courage, wisdom, truth, and humility. The third 7 strands are the 7 generations in front of them, children, great-grandchildren, and those yet to be born. This one is kind of important because it represents responsibility and reciprocity. Everything they do to Mother Earth will one day affect the future. The harvesting of braiding sweetgrass is a really powerful tradition that brings communities together, not much different than what we're doing right here tonight. It's a moment of connection between elders, youth, and families, symbolizing the importance of caring for the land and for one another. When they harvest sweetgrass, they gather 3 bunches of 7 strands. They're careful not to pull up the roots. It will continue to grow. They braid it right there on Mother Earth, then gently cut the grass. Jane just shared a little bit about how you braid sweetgrass if you're doing it for a little girl, but they do it in community here, and it's a wonderful series of events that they do with the braiding sweetgrass. So sweetgrass belongs to Mother Earth, so sweetgrass pickers collect properly and respectfully for their own use and the needs of their community. They return a gift to the earth and tend to the well-being of what they call the Winsuk. The braids are given as gifts to honor and say thank you, and to heal and to strengthen. When they give sweetgrass to the fire, when they burn it in a ceremony, it is a gift that is passed from hand to hand, growing richer as it is honored in every exchange. Many of the ancient teachings counsel that whatever we have been given is supposed to be given away again. This is the reason that Native Americans don't sell sweetgrass, because it is given to us, it should only be given to others. Now, I did purchase sweetgrass, but in the Native American cultures, they truly believe if it's a gift from nature, then they share it amongst each other, and it's not for you to sell. They just give it away. Indigenous knowledge teaches reciprocity, the understanding that Mother Earth provides for us, and we in turn have responsibility to care for her. It is a worldview rooted in gratitude, ceremony, and balance. The way this culture harvests and braids sweetgrass is also the way they live their whole lives. Joyful in the bounty of all the nature provides, they harvest their gardens and grow their medicines and raise their families with a deep love and respect for our planet. This is what resonates with me so much, as it mirrors part of my own family culture. While in our family we don't harvest sweetgrass, my family would gather in the summer. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to share a little story about my culture and what my family does that sort of mirrors these teachings. And so, but first, before I do that, I want to share, in the book, the author, she wonders she wonders what happens when people don't grow up with these teachings. Like, what happens when, you know, these children grow up with the love of the land and with respect for nature. And so those of us that may not have grown up with those things, where do we learn it? It's not hard. It's not a hard stretch from people who are spiritualists, because even one of their first principles is that what it says is we believe that God is expressed through all nature. So I got to thinking about my own experience with this. And as we read in my bio, I have a lot of experience out in nature. But where I really learned it, where I really kind of somebody just said to me, I used to belong to a youth organization that taught, for young girls, that taught leadership and community service and reverence for many, many things. And one of the lessons that they taught, in addition from religion and love and religion, nature was one of those lectures that they gave in some of our ceremonies that we belong there. So here's the way it goes. I'm trying to remember a little bit about what I learned and the lessons that it taught. So I'm going to recite a little bit about today. What the lesson says is, nature is out of doors, and you must not forget that a portion of your time belongs there. For it is in the quietness of the fields, under the shade of the trees, among the wildflowers that bloom, or where their birds sing their sweetest song, that you may commune with God. Get his lessons there, drink them into the very depth of your soul, for you will need them in the after years of responsibility. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I've spent a good deal of my life out in nature. And that's how most of us, when we know that we love nature, we go out and play. And we do all the wonderful things that nature provides. And that's how we raise our children. Go play, go outside, play, do whatever. And so, but with this idea about the after years of responsibility, there becomes a point, and most of it happens when you're grown, is you reach a threshold of the after years of responsibility. And it helps you to become responsible not only for your families and for your church and for your community, but it helps you to be responsible for the world in which you live in. And so the activities that you have as a child going out and play become the activities that you need to do when you enjoy a beautiful sunset, or when you're out in nature and somebody sings a beautiful song, or when you see that some creature in nature needs something and you take responsibility for that. So it's an amazing, amazing way in which people who don't grow up in these Native American cultures, we all have our own stories to tell about nature. And I think that is about the responsibility of it. So I want to share a little story about how my family, these teachings trying to mirror my family and some of the cultural things that we have. They braid sweetgrass in ceremony, and they have how can I say this? They have rituals that they provide. And I'm going to back up a little bit because there's some synchronicities that happened while I was trying to prepare for this. And one of the things was, I was watching a television show about, it's called U.S. Marshals, and it's on TV. And they had, it takes place in Montana, and they have a reservation of Indians there, and they were going to have a ceremony. They were going to have a ceremony to honor the life of the people in their tribe that had passed on in the past year. And so they got together and they braided the sweetgrass, and throughout the entire show, everything was leading up to this ceremony that they were going to invite people on the reservation to do. And so at the end of the show, I watched the chief. He had a braid of sweetgrass there, and they invited everybody to come. And they had pictures of everybody that had passed on into spirit over the past year. and he smudged the pictures, and he smudged their families, and they danced, and they were just smudging. And so it was a beautiful community service where they used sweetgrass to honor their past loved ones. And it was just done in community, and it was just absolutely beautiful. So I thought, what a wonderful synchronicity to actually see that portrayed on television. So when I said earlier about the braiding sweetgrass and how it's a symbol for how Native Americans live, they have something that's called an honorable harvest, and it's their rules of life, and they don't write it down. And I'm not going to tell you what all of it is, because I know there's a theme of this book, and there's so many things that are going to be talked here a little bit later with other speakers. So I'm just going to tell you that the honorable harvest is about the way they live their lives. And one of those things is they honor, at least one of them is that you harvest in a way that minimizes harm, and you use things respectfully and never waste what you've taken. I guess I am going to read I'm going to read you the honorable harvest here. You give thanks for what you've been given. You give a gift of reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will live forever. And take only that which is given, and never take more than half. Leave some for others. And when I read these things, when I read all of those things, I thought, wow, these seem like really good manners to me. And they do. In fact, I just thought, gosh, I could just hear my mother's voice in my head saying, don't be a glutton, and don't take more than you need, and just save some for others. Don't take seconds before everybody's head bursts. And this just seems pretty normal. That just seems like the way many of us lived in our lives. And so I found it really fascinating that even though those things weren't spoken, those things aren't spoken in our families either. So one of the things that kind of mirrors the sweetgrass and braided sweetgrass ceremony in my family, I think I mentioned my family lived on farms. Every year we had what we would call the canning of the beans. And my family would get together. My grandmother lived on a farm in Kentucky, and most of us lived in Michigan. And we, for a week, all of my parents and all the children and my aunts and my uncles and all the children would get together at Mama and Papa's house for the canning of the beans that year. And so we'd gather. They had a wonderful big old back porch. My sister and I would be given bowls to sit on the back porch, and they'd fill it with beans, and we'd have to break the beans and string the beans and then run them into the kitchen to do the canning. And if somebody showed up in our world that was just coming to visit on this great big back porch, they'd be given a bowl too. You know, it was just the way that happened. And Mama would show us how to pick the beans. This is really fascinating. You'd pick the beans, and they had a beautiful garden. They had beans and corn and squash and all of these different things, and she'd show us how to pick the beans. And there were a couple different kinds. There were white half-runners and shucky beans, and you weren't supposed to mix them. But she would show you how to pick the beans, and she would show you how not to pick the ones that weren't ripe, because we know that would be a sin, to pick something before it's too ripe. So she'd show us how to pick the beans, and she'd save some. She would save some of the seeds for the next year. It's very much like, don't take more than you need and save some for the next year. So our entire family would live for a week out of that garden. And we'd all be outside, and the other part about it was there was so much cooking with the canning of the beans. You'd run the beans into the kitchen, and all the women would be in there doing stuff. So we'd be canning the beans at the same time, trying to figure out 3 meals a day for all of these people, and the children and the men and everybody. And it was joyful. And I could say that I didn't always like breaking the beans, and neither did my cousins or all that kind of stuff, but I look back on it now, and I'm so grateful and honored to have done that, because it just makes you enjoy your life. It makes you feel good about your ancestors and what they did and how they lived their lives. And at the end of the week, after we had all been there, everybody got a case of beans to take home. It was just great. It just doesn't seem like, I can't even imagine that I'd be talking about the beans. But when I look back on it, I just think, what a joy, what a wonderful memory. And it's just like what Robin Wall Kimmerer said, it makes you remember, smelling the sweetgrass makes you remember the things that you had thought you'd forgotten. And that was one of those things. You know, my grandparents are long gone now, but we still have that amongst our family, that beautiful memory. And we try to create that for our own kids now. You know, even all my other grandparents, many of them grew up on farms, and even if they moved to the city and got jobs, they still had that mentality of growing things, and you know, their gardens out the kitchen door where you'd pick something. And my grandmother, the one that had the farm and we canned the beans, it was horrible for her to have to buy produce at the grocery store. For her, it was like, I am not paying 69 cents for a cucumber. That was awful. And the next year, even after she was older and my grandfather had died, my sister offered to help her put her garden together. And so she's in her 80s then, and she planted enough cucumbers to fill a wheelbarrow and just moved it into the, I mean, it was just unbelievable for her to do that. But that's what this is about. That is exactly how these teachings are. Your nature stories, it perpetuates things, and it makes you feel like you matter, and nature matters. You cannot live on this planet without that kind of nature. The farm was just, you know, it's a farm. You know, they were cows, and they had fresh blackberries that you could just walk out in the yard and get yourself a bowl of blackberries and bring them in the house. You got to be careful with the bees. You know, sometimes they got a little crazy, but yeah, that was the way it was. And so that kind of story makes you realize how beautiful and bountiful nature is and how much it continues to give back. So I have one other remembrance that I want to share with you about this, and then I'll close. So I'm just going to read it a little bit because it might make me a little bit emotional. Also, the other thing is another synchronicity that happened. I'll just go to a little side here. And when I got to Lilydale, we were sitting in the sacred grounds, Jane and Sue and Lori and I, and we were sharing stories about stuff. Jane was sharing about her catalpa tree, and Lori was sharing about her birds. She's feeding the birds, and how you know, the starlings would come, and then she'd feed the starlings and they'd overtake everything. And so she had to kind of back it up a little bit. And so it was amazing how we were sharing how when we love nature, it loves us back, and it wants more, and it gives more. So it was just a wonderful story. And one other story about Tom Kratzley, I have to say. This morning we were sitting on the porch, and Tom was talking about Sue was sharing some information about going to Ireland, and we were listening, and they were talking about how beautiful the land is, and he's all about that, how beautiful the land is, and he was just sharing, and he says, and you know what else in Ireland? All the animals are smiling, all of them. And he says, they smile, and then he went on, they take really good care of their animals there, and she was talking about the butter that they have and all that kind of stuff, and I said, really smiling? And so I suggested that he go to one of those pet services and see how many of the dogs are going to be smiling today after they get their prayers. But I just thought, oh my goodness, now that's all about nature. That's all about nature. Okay, so I'm going to share one more story, and I'm going to read about it. Okay. One other thing about my grandparents. They planted interesting, they are not familiar with these teachings, but they planted their gardens the way that they planted them, that Robin Wall Kimmerer says that they planted them. For example, you should plant beans and corn and squash together because the soil and the bugs and the way they climb, it nurtures them and it helps them to be more plentiful. My grandmother did that. I remember going out and watch her showing me everything in the garden. And I don't really like squash, but she showed me how this is growing here, and the beans were growing up the corn stalks, and somehow she knew that she was supposed to plant them that way, and because it makes them grow better. So sometimes you just know what the right thing to do is. So, all right. So here's my story. Years ago, the company I worked for had a picnic at a beautiful park in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Gallup Park is on the Huron River. There's a lot of wildlife, birds and ducks and turtles. Well, a dear friend of mine, Anna and I decided to take a paddle boat ride on the river. We stopped after a while to rest, and a dragonfly landed on Anna's arm. She shooed it away, but it kept hovering. So we decided that he liked us, and we told it so, admiring its beautiful green color and its wings, and it was just a beautiful. I mean, there's nothing unusual about dragonflies on the river, but this one was especially beautiful. So we sat there and admired it a little bit and talked, and we had been pedaling for a little while. So finally we decided to go back to shore and join our group, and we were kind of alone there, and then all of a sudden that dragonfly came back, and he brought like 6 or 8 of his friends. And I thought, oh my goodness, look, he went and got his friends. He likes us. See what happens when you appreciate nature. And it was just a silly conversation about all of that. And so, but it was a wonderful, wonderful day. So now I know it was, so we went back to meet our friends, and we got off the boat and took a bunch of pictures with our friends and colleagues and just had a glorious day to remember. It was just a wonderful picnic and just a great day out in nature. And I worked for people with disabilities, and many of them didn't get opportunities to do that a lot. But anyway, we just did, and it was wonderful. So Anna and I both love Gallup Park, and we went there periodically for walks later. Well, during COVID, Anna passed into spirit. When I went to Anna's parents' house to pay my respects, we sat on the porch, their porch, and looked at pictures. There was one of us from that day in the park, arm in arm, smiling. It was a beautiful, beautiful memory. So after that, Anna's parents asked the Parks Department if they could erect a wooden bench, a spot close to the river, in Anna's memory. So now there's a bench under a tree by the water where the ducks and the swans and the turtles and of course the dragonflies play. And they can be loved by Anna and all who go there. So the message of the story, the message of all of this story, is that we are loved, and that's exactly what we did that day. We are loved, and we love back, and we love each other, and we are loved again. That is the message of the holy, fragrant grass. So I hope, as you guys leave here tonight, that you ponder your own Mother Earth stories and you share them with others, because that's how it perpetuates. That's how you learn to love nature, by sharing all of these stories. And I hope that's what happens for all of you tonight. And remember, the holy, fragrant grass. Thank you very much.